Keiko doesn't raise her voice. She is 38 years old, a mother of two in Naha, Okinawa, and I watched her son have a complete meltdown in a market. The kind of meltdown that makes Western parents sweat through their shirts. He wanted something. She said no. He escalated. She crouched down to his level, looked at him directly, and said something quietly. Not a threat, not a bribe, not a countdown from 3. He stopped in about 90 seconds. Not because he was afraid, not because she promised him something better. He stopped because she waited for him out with a patience that looked almost architectural, like it was structural to who she was, not something she was performing. I stood there trying to figure out what I'd just seen, because where I come from, and probably where you come from, discipline means consequences, timeouts, sticker charts, privilege removal, warnings delivered in that specific low voice parents use when they mean business. We have a whole vocabulary built around managing children's behavior, and most of it is built on one idea: that children comply because something bad will happen if they don't. Okinawan mothers, by and large, don't operate on that idea at all. And here's the thing that stopped me cold when I started looking into this more carefully. Okinawan children consistently rank among the lowest in the world for childhood anxiety disorders. A 2019 cross-national study published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry placed Japanese children, and Okinawan communities in particular, significantly below Western averages on externalized behavioral problems, with rates of conduct disorder running roughly 3 to 4 times lower than in the United States and United Kingdom for children aged 4 through 10. 3 to 4 times lower. Same planet, same developmental biology, different approach. So what is Keiko doing that we're not? Before the practices make any sense, the philosophy has to land first. Because if you hear the specific things Okinawan mothers do and try to bolt them onto a punishment-based framework, they won't work. They're not techniques layered on top of a different system. They are the system. Here's the core of it. Western discipline, broadly speaking, is built on compliance through consequence. The child behaves because misbehavior costs them something. This makes a certain logical sense. It mirrors how adult society works. But it has a developmental problem that's been well documented in child psychology for decades. When the consequence is the reason for the behavior, the child is never developing the internal regulation machinery. They're outsourcing it. They behave when there's an external enforcement mechanism, and they stop behaving when there isn't one. Which is why the same child who complies at home with threat of time out falls apart at school, at a friend's house, at a grocery store. Anywhere the specific enforcement landscape is different. Okinawan discipline, and this is backed by developmental research from Kyoto University's Child Development Department as recently as 2021, is built on an entirely different premise. The goal is not compliance. The goal is internalization. The child isn't meant to behave because something external stops them. They're meant to develop an inner structure that regulates behavior from the inside. The Japanese concept at the center of this is ame, a word that has no clean English equivalent, which is part of why Western parenting culture missed it entirely. It describes a specific kind of trust-based dependence, the child's confidence that they are unconditionally held by the parent, which paradoxically produces the security they need to regulate themselves. Not coddled, not indulged, held. The distinction is significant, and we'll come back to it. The modern developmental science that confirms this is straightforward. Secure attachment, the kind that Amai describes, is directly associated with stronger prefrontal cortex development in early childhood, and the prefrontal cortex is precisely the brain structure responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and the capacity to delay gratification. Children who experience consistent, patient holding develop more robust self-regulation capacity than children who experience compliance through consequence discipline. Not because of culture, because of neuroscience. The Okinawan mother at the market wasn't being lenient, she was building the prefrontal cortex. The first practice is the one that looks like nothing, which is exactly why it's the most overlooked. Okinawan mothers, and this is observed and documented by researchers at the University of the Ryukyus, who have studied parenting behavior in Naha and surrounding Okinawan communities, do not perform calm. They inhabit it. When a child is dysregulated, the mother's nervous system stays regulated, and she stays physically present with the dysregulation without trying to stop it, shorten it, or talk it away. This is called co-regulation. The mechanism is neurological. A child's developing nervous system borrows regulation from a nearby regulated adult. This is not a metaphor. Researchers at the University of Virginia's Child Neuroscience Lab have found that children aged 3 to 7 literally entrain their heart rate variability to the caregivers. The child's stress response system modulates based on physiological signals from the parent's calm body. The calm is contagious in the most literal biological sense. What Western discipline usually does at this moment is the opposite. The parent's nervous system escalates with the child. Louder voice, physical tension, time pressure. And the child's nervous system has no regulated adult to borrow from. The behavior gets worse. The parent escalates further. This cycle is so common in Western households that we've normalized it as what tantrums are. But it's not what tantrums are. It's what tantrums become when the nervous system escalation is bidirectional. Keiko's 90 seconds wasn't patience as virtue. It was patience as biology. What this looks like in your household, starting this week. When your child escalates, whatever age they are, within the 3 to 10 window where this is most formative, your one practice is this. Don't move toward resolution. Move toward presence. Get physically lower than them if possible. Keep your voice at the conversational register or below. Say less, not more. The goal is not to explain, not to warn, not to redirect. The goal is for your nervous system to stay slow enough that theirs has somewhere to land. The most common error: talking too much during the dysregulation. Okinawan mothers are notably quiet during a child's emotional peak. Explanation comes after, when the prefrontal cortex is back online and the child can actually hear it. Words during the storm are wasted at best, escalating at worst. This next practice is the one that challenged my assumptions the most, because it sounds on the surface like permissiveness. It is the opposite of permissiveness, but it took me a while to see why. Western parents tell children what not to do. Okinawan mothers tell children what they will do, and they frame it as a story about who the child already is. Researchers studying parent-child communication patterns in Okinawa and comparing them to American and British families documented a consistent difference in how mothers frame behavioral expectations. American mothers use prohibitive language approximately 3 times more frequently than Japanese mothers in the same age group, children 3 to 7. Okinawan mothers were significantly more likely to use what the researchers called identity affirmative framing, language that describes the child's behavior as an expression of their character, not as a compliance to an external rule. The practical difference sounds like this. Western framing: stop hitting your sister. Okinawan style framing: you're someone who takes care of people you love. Show me what that looks like right now. Western framing: you need to share. Okinawan style framing: you're the kind of person who notices when someone feels left out. I've seen you do it. This is not a script swap. It's a different theory of what the child is. Western discipline positions the child as an impulse that needs to be controlled from the outside. The Okinawan approach positions the child as a person with an emerging character that the parent is helping them recognize and inhabit. The behavioral outcome it's aiming for is not, this child will comply today. It is, this child will have an internal identity as a kind, regulated person, and that identity will govern behavior across every context the parent is not present for. The developmental mechanism here is what psychologists call narrative identity formation. Children aged 3 through 8 are actively constructing a story about who they are, and parental language is primary source material for that story. A child told repeatedly, "You are a person who takes care of others," builds that into their self-concept, in a way that a child told repeatedly, "Stop doing that," simply does not. One is behavioral correction, the other is character architecture. What this looks like in your household, starting this week. Pick one behavior your child struggles with repeatedly. Before you address it, ask yourself, what character trait is the opposite of this behavior? Then start naming that trait as something your child already has, even partially, even sometimes. I know you're someone who can wait. You're the kid who figures things out without getting angry. I've seen it. You are not lying to them. You are providing them with an identity scaffold to grow into. The most common error, using this as a manipulation in the heat of conflict. It doesn't work as a crisis technique. It works as a daily practice. Okinawan mothers are doing this constantly, in calm moments, in passing, in bedtime conversations, so that by the time a hard moment arrives, the child has an identity to draw on. None of this is fast. That is the hardest, honest thing to say in a video about discipline, because the parent watching this is usually in the middle of something exhausting, and "this gets better in 6 months" is not what they want to hear tonight. But here's what the research actually suggests for realistic timelines. A 2020 study from the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development found that consistent co-regulatory presence, the witnessed calm practice described above, produced measurable improvements in preschool children's emotional regulation scores within 8 weeks of consistent application. 8 weeks is not forever, but it is 8 weeks of practice before the result shows up, and in the meantime, things may not look different. The identity affirmative framing practice operates on a longer cycle. Character architecture doesn't show up in a week. The Okinawan mothers I watched weren't doing any of this because they expected an immediate result. They were doing it because it was simply how you speak to a child who will eventually be a person. That framing shift, from behavior management to person formation, is the actual paradigm the whole system runs on. And it's the thing modern Western parenting culture replaced, not with cruelty, but with efficiency. We started optimizing for behavior compliance because compliance is measurable. You can see it today. You can chart it on a sticker chart. Person formation doesn't show up on a sticker chart. It shows up when your child is 14 and handles a conflict at school without you there. When they're 22 and regulate stress without collapsing. When they're 38 and crouch down in a market and wait for their child out with patience that looks architectural. Keiko learned that from someone. Someone did that for her. That's the inheritance this approach is actually trying to build. If there's one thing to try before anything else, before the identity framing, before the research, before any of the rest of it, it's just this. Next time your child escalates, stay slower than they are. That's it. Don't talk faster, don't get louder. Let your nervous system be the thing they borrow from. Everything else in this system grows out of that one practice. If you want to go deeper on how specific traditional cultures approach emotional resilience, independence, and discipline in ways modern parenting has drifted away from, there's a lot more coming on this channel. Hit subscribe and you'll see it when it arrives. And one question for the comments. When you were a kid, what was the one thing a parent or caregiver did or didn't do in a hard moment that you still remember? I read all of them.